Hi guys, it's Arielle. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. I hope you guys are all doing well. Today's video is about the Guide Michelin, and I was inspired to make this video because Jean and I decided that we want to try a Michelin-starred restaurant in Paris. But as I was going through and looking at the menus and looking at the prices, I became very curious why they were so expensive and what exactly you're paying for when you go to a Michelin-starred restaurant. So in today's video, I'm going to be covering the history, the purpose, and the criteria of what it means to be a Michelin-starred restaurant. Now, just a reminder before we get into this video, if you guys are planning a trip to Paris in the near future, then you should definitely check out my website, getthemargarita.com. I have my Paris guides and itineraries on there for you, and they are perfect whether it's your first or 10th trip to Paris. I also have the registration for my summer meetup. And if you're interested in more relaxed Paris content and my podcast, you can also check out my second channel, which is Get the Margarita. So I will leave everything linked down below. Now let's get into the video. So by definition, a starred restaurant is any restaurant that's received a star by a guidebook. The two most famous guidebooks are the Michelin, of course, but you also have the Goemilo, and I'll make a second video in the future on the Goemilo because today we're just going to be talking about the Guide Michelin. And the Guide Michelin actually has everything to do with the Michelin tire company. I was very surprised by this. I truly thought it was just coincidence that a leading tire manufacturer shared the same name as a culinary guidebook, but if we look back at their origin story, it'll all make sense. So in 1832, we have the cousins Edouard Daubré and Aristide Barbier, who joined forces to create the Barbier-Daubré Company, which was a farm machinery business that used rubber in many of their parts and was located in Clermont-Ferrand, France. In 1889, Aristide Barbier's daughter, Adèle, who was married to a man named Jules Michelin, asked her sons André and Edouard for help with the business. They changed the name of the company to Michelin & C and started by launching a brake pad that was used for hackney cabs and horse-drawn carriages called the Silent. Now, the story gets interesting in 1891 when a cyclist with a punctured tire appeared on the lawn of the manufacturing plant in Clermont-Ferrand. This cyclist had state-of-the-art tires, which were pneumatic tires, but they had punctured, and the problem is the pneumatic tires at the time were glued onto the bicycle. So in order to repair that tire, you'd have to remove it from the bike, repair it, glue it back onto the bike, and then wait hours for it to dry. So the Michelin brothers did end up repairing this tire for the cyclist, but within 15 minutes after it was repaired, it popped again. So they actually took a special interest in this tire problem specifically. They ended up creating a detachable tire that could be repaired within 15 minutes, which eliminated all the hours that you previously needed for gluing and then drying a tire. In 1895, the brothers designed a car called the Éclair, which means lightning bolt in English, where they mounted the tires that they designed onto the vehicle and entered it into the Paris-Bordeaux-Paris race. The vehicle didn't win, but it did make history by becoming the first car to ride on air. And this race allowed the Michelin brothers to showcase their tires to the world. Not just that, but really make a name for themselves and their brand as reliable, comfortable, and innovative. In 1898, we have the creation of the very famous Michelin Man, which came straight out of the imagination of André and Edouard. And just a few years later, in 1900, we have the very first Michelin guide that was released. And at this point in time, in the early 1900s, driving a car was somewhat of an unknown. There wasn't this huge network of roads and highways that we have today, and finding a gas station was more than a challenge. There were less than 3,000 people in France at this time who owned a car. So the Guide Michelin was actually meant to serve as a marketing technique. In order to both support their current customers, but also generate interest and curiosity and demand for cars, and by extension, tires, they created this free red booklet called the Guide Michelin, which was jam-packed with both technical and practical information. So you have things like where you can find the closest gas station, where you can find the closest mechanic, but also some recommendations for hotels you should stay in, or restaurants that you should try. And initially, all of the information in this guide came from their salesmen who were constantly on the road traveling all throughout France. In 1909, the English version of the guide for France was published, and up until 1920, the guide continued to be given away for free. However, one day, upon visiting a tire store, André noticed copies of his guide being used to prop up a workbench. And based on the principle that man only truly respects what he pays for, he decided to charge a fee for this guidebook, which was about 7.5 francs or $2.15 in 1922. The brothers also started to notice this growing interest, particularly in the restaurant section of their guidebook, so they decided to organize everything by category, and then they recruited a group of secret inspectors that would go to the restaurants and review them. It was in 1926 when they first started to award stars for the fine dining restaurants, and this really became the reference point for food lovers and connoisseurs at the time. Initially, there was only one single star awarded, but then in 1931, the hierarchy of 0, 1, 2, and 3 stars was introduced, and then in 1936, the criteria for the rankings was actually published and still holds true today. 1 star means a very good restaurant in its category. 2 stars, exceptional cooking, worth a detour, and 3 stars, exceptional cuisine, worth a special journey. Another very cool addition to the Guide Michelin outside of their 3-star ranking system is the Bible Gourmande, which was a feature added in 1997, and this is a section of the guide that highlights restaurants that have exceptional cuisine, but with a reasonable price tag. And Bib, by the way, is the nickname for the Michelin Man. So how does everything work? Well, the Guide Michelin still does send out their inspectors. Their identities are very mysterious. They truly are undercover. Not even the top executives at Michelin know the names of their inspectors. They all have over 10 years experience in hospitality, and they are trained rigorously on the Michelin guide and standards. The same inspector will never review the same restaurant, and the decision whether or not to award a star and how many is always collective. So they'll send several guides out to one restaurant. They will test different dishes, different days, and collectively that group of inspectors will decide what that restaurant should be awarded. The 5 criteria that the restaurant is judged on are the following. Number 1, the quality of the restaurant products. Number 2, the harmony of the flavors. 3, the capacity to master techniques. 4, the personality of the chef as expressed through the food and dining experience. And number 5, the consistency over time and the coherence of the menu as a whole. And just to be clear, the stars are awarded to the restaurant and not the chef directly. Despite what many think, the Guide Michelin actually does not evaluate on decor, atmosphere, or service. They really do claim to only evaluate the quality of the food. However, many are very quick to call bluff on this one. There is an overwhelming amount of chefs and critics of the Michelin system that have voiced their opinions on this, saying that chefs with restaurants that are starred feel this immense pressure to maintain those stars, citing things such as changing the dishes, the linens, and the decor every couple months, adding a valet service, removing tables from their dining space so that it's more comfortable for their customers, etc. And there are many chefs who want to avoid the whole Michelin guide and starred ranking system in general, just because, number 1, they don't want the pressure that they would feel of having to maintain a star if they did achieve one. And number 2, they don't want the financial responsibility that so many chefs and restaurants associate with gaining a Michelin star. And it was so interesting because last year I had the opportunity to go to a restaurant gastronomique in Bretagne. It was the best food of my entire life. And when I spoke to the chef, I was so surprised to hear that he had no interest in getting a Michelin star, but he explained it to me. He's like, I feel like it's a scam. I want to focus on my food. I want to focus on the quality of my meals. I don't want to focus or feel like I have to invest a lot of money in creating this hugely luxurious experience that he associated with the Guide Michelin. So while the Guide Michelin is useful, it's definitely not all-encompassing. So that is all for today's video. I hope you guys learned something new about the history, the purpose, the criteria of the Guide Michelin. In the future, I will take you with Jean and I to a Michelin-starred restaurant. That way you can see what the experience is like and decide whether or not it's something that you want to do when you come to Paris. Let me know if you guys have any questions down below, and I'll see you in the next one.